The fight to clean up our financial system is just one of the battles being duked out between big money and the public interest. Here's another, the fight over control of the Internet. This is crucial to every other battle between corporate and public America. At stake right now is what's called net neutrality. Essentially, that means the web should remain a small d democratic forum for all comers, open and available to everyone. The big media companies that provide broadband for the Internet don't like that notion. They want the power to censor Internet content they don't like. And they want toll booths on the web so they can charge more for the privilege of driving in the fast lanes. You can learn more about this by going to our website at pbs.org/Moyers. We'll link you to a documentary special we produced 4 years ago called Net at Risk. Back in 2007, shortly after that report aired, the Associated Press reported that Comcast, the nation's largest cable provider, was manipulating the speed of web traffic and discriminating against certain customers. The Federal Communications Commission told Comcast to stop it. Comcast argued back that the commission had no business telling it how to manage network traffic. Now a federal court of appeals has come down on Comcast's side, ruling that the FCC has only limited authority to regulate the Internet. At issue is whether the Internet is a medium of communications like the others the FCC has historically regulated, or just an information service beyond most government oversight. Advocates of net neutrality argue that if the FCC simply reclassifies broadband as a communication service, the Commission will then have the authority it needs to enforce an open Internet. With me now is Michael Copps, who is serving his second 5-year term as an FCC commissioner. This one-time professor of history, influential Senate staffer, and Assistant Secretary of Commerce is an outspoken advocate for an open Internet and a staunch opponent of media conglomeration. He just may be the most knowledgeable fellow in Washington on how communications policy affects you and me. Welcome, Commissioner Copps, back to the Journal.
Thank you for having me back.
So let's start with some clarity of terms. What does net neutrality mean to you?
Well, it's kind of an inelegant term for the need that we have to keep the most transformative technology that we have had. This is broadband and the Internet, I think, more transformative than anything since the printing press. How do we make sure that it achieves its promise and potential for the average American citizen? Our future is going to ride on broadband. How we get a job is going to ride on broadband. How we take care of our health, how we educate ourselves about our responsibilities as citizens. This all depends upon being able to go where you want to go on that Internet, to run the applications that you want to run, to attach the devices, to know what's going on. That's what net neutrality is all about. And it's absolutely imperative that we have a place, that we have a venue to go to make sure that that Internet is kept open. You have a choice. I mean, you can say, do we want our cable company or our telephone company to handle all of this, or do we want to make sure that the government has some oversight here? That's our decision to make as a people, as citizens. Who's going to control this ultimately? Who's going to make sure? This isn't about regulating the Internet. This is making sure that the Internet is kept open and that others don't close the doors and become gatekeepers or the keepers of those toll booths that you talked about before.
So is that metaphor apt that Comcast and AT&T and Verizon want to set up a price system so that if you've got more money, you get there and go faster than those if you don't have money? Is that crude?
I think what history tells us is that if you're a business and you have the technical capacity to advance yourself by shortchanging somebody else or disadvantaging somebody else, and you have a financial incentive to do that, somebody's going to try. Now, that doesn't mean that I'm here blasting every company or every business executive that's out there, but somebody's going to try, and it's the bad apples that you've got to protect against.
And your concern is that these big telecommunications agencies can monopolize the traffic that gets on the Internet, or at least the speed at which we travel?
Absolutely.
But what does it mean practically then that the Federal Appeals Court said to the FCC, which has regulated telephones, radio, television, in effect, you can't touch broadband. You can't touch the net.
Well, some people are saying that we're out of that business now. I don't believe that's true. But I will tell you this. The previous FCC basically gave the courts a gilt-edged invitation to do what they did.
The Bush administration.
Right. We used to...
Under Michael Powell, who was the chairman at the time of the FCC?
We used to call communications telecommunications. But at the behest of a lot of the big companies back in 2002, over my strong and serious objections, we decided to call it something else and move it from that part of the law which said telecommunications has to provide consumer protection and privacy, guarantee the public safety, and you have some oversight responsibility. We took it to another section that says, you know, it's kind of a never-never land. You don't really have to do anything, and we put it there.
What did you
call it? We
called
it an information service.
So you changed telecommunications to information service. What difference does that make?
Because we robbed it of all of the responsibilities and protections that we had spent 20 or 30 years putting on to the telecommunications companies so we could protect consumers, have some say in rates and how things were built and how things were shared and how we got them out, protecting privacy, making sure that that telecommunications system really worked for the future of the country. Now, put it over here, it's, well, we can still do what we need to do by some ambiguous authority, and the court said, no, you can't. So
you're proposing, as I understand it, to move it back, to redefine it again as a telecommunications.
Let's call it what it is. I don't think we have telephone companies and cable companies and all this. We have broadband companies, and they're all in there competing with one another. They're all looking for control of the distribution. Now they're looking for content, all the recipes for monopoly and duopoly that we have seen throughout our history. This is the way we communicate. We ought to look at it as a big ecosystem. And all this cable, radio, television, the internet is all part of this ecosystem. And you can't have legitimate public interest oversight of that if you go in with some stovepipe analysis. Well, this is telecom, this is cable. It's all the same thing. And we're all so dependent upon it. So we have to find a way to conduct that public oversight in a holistic, in a systematic, and an intelligent fashion. And I think we can use the law we have right now, if we reclassify, to do that.
The industry wrote a letter to the commission and said that advocates of an open net who are coming to the FCC and asking you to reclassify what you do as telecommunications want to steer the debate, and I'm quoting from the letter, in a radical new way. I mean, they're calling you extremist and they're calling you radical.
Because I want to call telecommunications, and go back to the openness that has characterized the net since it was first invented in the laboratories of the Department of Defense. That's not extreme, that's not radical, that's called going back to basics. That's called Consumer Protection 101.
How threatened is the whole idea of an open net?
Oh, I think very. I think there are powerful players that are opposed to it, are in a position to make their influence felt. None of these things are going to come easy. We've just been through the health insurance debate. We've got the financial debacle. None of this stuff gets solved without taking on a fight. Government doesn't work that way. You've studied its history. I've studied its history. It's painful. It needs movements. It needs grassroots support. It needs the people.
You're saying there's a very strong populist element here?
I think so.
Populist interest meaning the people versus interest?
Well, yes, I do. I think people are more interested in this. You know, we went through this media ownership debate several years ago, and I think the powers that be at the Federal Communications Commission at that time said, oh, we can get rid of all of these ownership restrictions. We don't care how many broadcast outlets one company can hold, and nobody cares around the country. I mean, this is just too arcane. It's too sophisticated. We'll just do this inside the Beltway. I said, let's go out and have some hearings. Oh, no, you don't want to have hearings. We'll just take care of this here. But by the time we were through, 3 million people had contacted the FCC and Congress to voice their displeasure, and we did have hearings at my insistence around the country where we would go for 7, 8, 9 hours at night in town hall meetings with people talking about something's wrong in my media system. I'm not getting the news anymore, or I'm a minority. None of my news ever gets covered, or when I'm on TV, I'm there as a caricature of or a stereotype of something I'm not. People get it, and people understand.
Yeah, as you know, we covered some of